Hey, welcome to episode 11 of the Bonus Material Podcast. I'm Sean.
I'm Heather.
I'm Thom.
And I'm Langley.
Woohoo! All right, guys, let's get right into it. Thom, you posted a really cool link the other day on our Facebook page, and I was super happy to find it there. It was for the new John Carpenter album, Lost Themes, which I had heard a couple of songs off of already, Vortex, and I think it was Obsidian or Night, but now the whole thing's going on NPR. Has anybody else listened to it?
I heard some of it. NPR does that. They had the Kate Bush album, the last Kate Bush album, like a week or so before release, and were available for streaming. So it's a cool thing that they do. But yeah.
Well, I listened to the whole thing, and it's pretty damn good, and it's recommended. Of course, it's super, super 80s, like you'd expect. There's more guitar work on it than I was thinking there was going to be, though. But I think that's his son, Cody.
When you say it's 80s, do you define that as it as a retro sound?
Well,
like Harold Faltermeyer.
That's interesting that you asked that, Heather, because I was just listening to it before we started recording, and I was like, well, is it 80s or is it just John Carpenter? And
Yep.
it's just his style that is so indicative of the 80s, but for lack of a better term, I'll call it 80s sounding, but it's really not. It's just John Carpenter. It's the synth, it's the guitar, it's the way he uses a drum program. Yeah, good stuff. Heavily,
Not a fan.
I can't wait to pick up the vinyl. So, Thom, you had another item that you just mentioned.
Oh, Cameron Romero, George Romero's son, is doing a prequel, supposedly, to Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Because
Night
that's going to work out so well.
Night of the Living Dead horse.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's how many times has it been remade? How many times have those remakes
Well, I love the 1990 remake.
Savini's remake? Agreed.
Yeah.
And I would say that Optic Nerve, shout out to John Vulich, but Optic Nerve, some of the best zombie makeup ever.
I agree with that. Best zombies currently that I have ever seen in cinema.
I think I have to agree. Dr. Tongue in particular.
That's
Day of
Day of the
the
Dead.
Oh,
And that was my second.
No,
you're right.
Terry Funk in the Graveyard is a fucking masterful zombie. That and the guy on the guy in the road that gets run over, fucking awesome.
I love the Cancer Father. He's great. You don't see a lot of disease on your zombies nowadays. So clean.
And I will say one thing about the 1990 remake. Them hiding in the attic. Thank you. Lots.
Yeah. Well, there's also the one that he hits with a tire iron on the porch. That when he strikes him, like dust comes off of him. Simple gag, but man, it stuck out in my head years later, and I've seen a lot of stuff since. So
true that.
Now that prequel, I mean, it could possibly work because all of his movies got more and more political until you hit Land of the Dead.
Well, I think if I put paper wings on my dog and threw it up the roof, that might work. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to be terrible.
And Cameron Romero has not.
No offense, George and Cameron, but I think
Yeah. Okay. Well, even worse.
To bring us into our subject, because it's like what works and doesn't work. I think if you came up with a good story and it was a searing satire, more so than Land and more so of Dawn, if they have that in them, that would be an interesting way to approach it.
Well, speaking of satire and all of that, the last news item that is also zombie related, I'm going to bring up, and get ready to groan: The Walking Deceased, a scary movie style comedy, of course, based around
zombie humor.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love My Boyfriend's Back. Is it as good?
Well, it's Heather. Yeah, I think Magic 8 Ball. Let me shake it.
Oh,
Yeah,
The Walking Deceased.
So no, not the main performance does not hold up to Johnny Dingle.
No.
Not even within
does
the.
anything.
It's
I would have
true.
at least changed the name more, like the ambulatory deceased, or the shuffling deceased, or. But then you lose the brand, right?
No,
Yeah.
no, yeah. I was going to say it's not like an Asylum knockoff.
Who's
It's
who's doing it?
bad, scary movie kind of thing. A couple of the people who were involved, I think, with the scary movie franchise. So,
If it, maybe it's the Wayans or someone. That's
it's definitely
really
not the Wayans. I saw the names and I didn't recognize them, but
yeah,
the Wayans weren't involved, and there was no Anna Faris, so they can just kind of.
yeah. That's too bad.
Oh.
That's
The
like
name
there's like
that's
a
been taken.
there's like a flow, right? Where like a monster is
Oh, there's a flow. There's
it
a
is.
flow.
Listen, where a monster is terrifying, and then it usually buddies up with another monster, and then ultimately that monster gets played for laughs, and then it goes away.
It
And
turns
so,
into Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
right, which is a great movie, but
That's also part of monster kid culture, so I don't look at that as a bad thing. It's like our beloved monsters of our youth that we're friends with. I mean, those are the jigsaws of the generation after us.
I guess.
And that zombies are cute, but it's always been controversial, the horror comedy. I like
Well,
horror comedy because I'm friends with monsters, and I like the cracked monster party aesthetic of horrible films that I love, like Transylvania 65000, that are incredibly beloved to me. But they are hated. That and the real death stuff. It's very controversial within the horror world.
Well, I don't mind Transylvania
Talk about that.
65000, and I love Frankenstein. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and of course Young Frankenstein and stuff like that. But The Walking Deceased just sounds like a money grab. Hell, it doesn't sound like a money grab. It is a money grab, and it's going to be fucking lame.
All of it's a money grab. I mean, take it from someone who's made a little money off the zombie trade. A lot of it's it's just the flavor du jour. It's like, what? Vampires don't work anymore? Boom. Zombies are hot? Let's do a zombie novel. And, not mine, of course.
So find
Which is
find
called No Flesh Shall Be Spared.
on eBay and read that instead. Is that what we're saying?
Find what on eBay?
Book of the Dead.
Oh,
Yeah.
Skip
Yeah.
Spectre, classic anthology
Yeah,
based in the Romero universe.
That is some great stuff.
And then the second book, Still Dead, which is not quite as good, but still has its moments.
Never picked that up. Excited that I could find any.
Oh, the
splatter
second one?
Yeah.
The second one has Elizabeth Massey's A Bed in it.
Yeah, which our dear deceased friend Phil Nutman produced a short film version of with our other friend Ryan Leisky.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so,
here's the
yeah.
Phil. Actually, let's dedicate this episode to Phil. We're thinking
Yeah.
about you, buddy.
Yeah.
So do we want to move on into our subject?
I'd love to.
Yep.
Why don't you take over the reins, Heather, and get us started?
Well, we're talking about horror films, contemporary, and where they're going and where they're failing. For me, my first war crime, and we can call them war crimes, is this cult around bro horror,
Yeah.
which is a bunch of contemporary filmmakers who have not a freak bone in their body saying, I'm going to create this intense, awesome movie, which they're not brave enough to pull off because it comes down to the sort of vanity and place where they're coming from in their life. There's dick jokes, Jaeger shots, hot chicks, upper middle class white people, privilege, and it's infected our beloved genre. My people.
Name some names. Let's get controversial like the Prince song.
Very controversial. Well, we've all spoken this before. It's sort of the head vampire, and I believe that if he's destroyed, that all the vampires will go back to normal. Would of course be Eli Roth's films. His pretty much all his canon, most particularly Green Inferno, which is out now. I know, Sean, that you're at Sundance and Knock Knock's out there.
Yep, I saw Knock Knock the other day at Sundance.
How does that rank up on the Brometer?
To me, it reeked of him okay, think of the guy who's like, "Hey, I'm not a racist. I have black friends." It came off kind of like that, like almost like he's trying to prove he's not a misogynist. Also, it's a remake, pretty much part and parcel of a movie called Death Games with Colleen Camp and Sandra Locke, and they both get executive producer credits in the film. To quickly contextualize, Keanu Reeves, I already hear the laughing. Keanu Reeves, this is no John Wick, Tom, for one thing, but he's a successful husband who's home alone for the weekend. These two hot girls show up. They coerce him into screwing them, even though he's happily married. And then the tables are turned, and he's tied to a chair, and it becomes again another torture porn. Um, the audience was exactly who you described, Heather. I sat next to a hipster who couldn't stop stroking his whiskers for the entire thing, even to the point of me staring at him and almost punching him in the face, chewing his nails. Uh, Also, I sat next to a person who walked out of another movie called White God about a canine revolt during a dogfight scene, but yet would sit through this completely. I mean, all it is, I don't even need to describe it. All it is Keanu Reeves tied to a chair by two hot chicks who berate him and beat him for the entire movie while he begs for it.
That's a solid 90 minutes of entertainment right there. Though. Come on.
So, yeah.
Well, I was lucky enough to see Green Inferno, which is finally going to be released 8 months from now, and I saw that 2 years ago at Fantastic Fest at 11 a.m. in the morning, and that's another film that is incredibly xenophobic. It has cannibals that have the munchies, and again, it never goes far enough. And a lot of the guys working within that canon, it's like, well, you can't go far enough. You can't really give me horror if you're so worried about your brand or picking up the hot chick. Because
Right.
that's what horror is about. It's about being incredibly vulnerable and showing vicious things because you had the ability to row through the river Styx, gather up the death, gather up the monsters, and bring them back.
Right.
And there's a lack of that. And bro horror is a representation of that. Also, a lot of the branded stuff that we see, it sort of has lost its edginess.
Well,
It's
look at what's happened
quality.
or
It's
not happened
metal
to Adam
quality.
Green and even Joe Lynch. You know, another part of that kind of crew.
Let's be honest. Look,
Please.
none of those guys were ever great filmmakers. They were learning filmmakers. They'd cut their teeth on a lot of like TV and that kind of thing, and they make a serviceable project. The thing that I take umbrage at the bro horror thing is kind of my same problem I have with Kevin Smith, that it's horror's easy. That, oh, I can do this, man. I got this, bro. I I can just slap a story together and throw some blood around and some really squidgy scenes. And as Heather says, I could be misogynistic and I can be, all of these things. But at the end of the day, I don't. I come to the table without a philosophy and something I want to say. I'm just making product.
Oh,
And
go ahead.
go ahead.
It's also something I got into when I did a long series of talks with the director Tom Holland, the guy who did like Fright Night and Child's Play. And at first he was like, "Yeah, I love these guys," and I was like, "Well, no, they're derivative." He goes, "Well, so is the stuff that we all did," and I think the big difference is people like Tom Holland and the guys who are making the '80s stuff and earlier have all also read books. I mean, all of those guys have read Poe through Richard Matheson, but you talk to an Adam Green or even a Joe Lynch, and I forget the word you used, Tom, to describe the quote unquote fans who reference Jess Franco and people like that, but they know the name and they know what the work is about, but they've never engaged with the
They wear the T-shirts, and that's how they can get past all of the horror fans.
right.
They go like, "I have a Cannibal Holocaust T-shirt. I'm just like you,"
Well,
and the price of entry is incredibly dropped.
it's making its way into the general horror fan too. The general horror fan does a lot of that themselves now because they've grown out of the Adam Green, Joe Lynch, Eli Roth school of product. You know,
I think a lot of that comes from what I've complained about before with the internet generation, in that in the past, for you to really have a pedigree in horror, you had to go and you had to go find stuff. You had to look things up. It wasn't easy. You had to seek things out. Now everything is there available at the touch of a fingertip, and you don't really know it. You haven't experienced it. You don't really know it. What drives me crazy about bro horror is that these guys like Eli Roth and people like that watch these modern classics from the 80s, and they paid attention to the wrong people. In those movies, the bros were always the bad guys. They were the bullies. They were the guys that were picking on the protagonist. The protagonist was usually somebody who was underrepresented. They were picked on. They were on the outside. They were us. And the guy with the nice hair and the cool car with the good looking chick, blah blah blah. He was the asshole who got it. He was the asshole that the monster got. He was the asshole that our protagonist wound up taking down. And these guys paid attention to the wrong people. They haven't stayed true to that.
They became those people. They all have cool tribal tattoos or, 5-gauge earrings. And
upper middle class Caucasian background, which comes tumbling down because of like the brown people they found in the jungle or foreign folk that would destroy their lives. Yeah. So again, it plays to that xenophobia, but that's also a classist kind of issue because those jocks in those films were from a different category. Right. And sort of the stoners and punks and alternative people and weirdos that then made these films behind the camera or journeymen.
And like you said, go ahead, Tom.
It brings up something that I call generation loss, where it's like, it used to be that, as you guys were saying, like filmmakers had lives, and their filmmaking was based on their lives and real life, and they weren't copying somebody else. So there's this mimicry that has happened over the years that's led to things just getting, like the edge getting dulled and dulled and dulled, and the audience's tastes are getting jaded and jaded and jaded because of the internet. So I worry about that because it's hard to find quote unquote original horror unless you go to original horror comedy. But name me some original horror in the last few years.
Well, that's the thing. If you sit down and you're discussing making films and people are pitching ideas, all you hear is, it's a this or it's a that. They're referencing things that they've seen, that things that have already been done. And then people go, yeah, let's do Sean's Railhouse that he rails against. Let's do a Grindhouse movie. You don't do a Grindhouse movie. You were either part of the Grindhouse, or not. I mean, it's like, and so it's. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we all don't like bro horror.
And you know what else has been bugging me? This Christianity in disguise in horror movies. I'm sure it's not intentional, but one of my most hated fucking horror movies ever, and it's recent, is The fucking Conjuring about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the demonologists. For one, they were despicable people in real life. They allowed abuse to go on in families that they were, quote unquote, investigating paranormal activity with. When, I don't want to get us in a lawsuit or anything, but
let's not.
I knew a writer at one point who was working directly with them and deduced that some very, very bad shit was going on in the home. And it had nothing to... What is that phone thing? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That was weird. I was hearing like a phone dial. Anyway, this writer deduced that some very, very bad shit was going on in the home, and it had nothing to do with the devil or ghosts and everything to do with an alcoholic father. When he brought it to the attention of the Warrens and his publisher, they said, shut up and write something scary. That's what you're being paid to do. Now, seeing a couple of crackpots like the Warrens completely turned into heroes in something like The Conjuring, which also I didn't find very scary. Just from a technical standpoint, I thought it was lukewarm at best, and didn't it doesn't even stand up to the old TV horror that I used to love. That wasn't even up to a PG-13 level, but this weird kind of like God's gonna save you kind of thing. There's another
But
movie.
hasn't that always been the case? I mean, with vampires, it's pretty Catholic in nature, right?
Even at the
But
end
we
of
accept.
Vampire in Retreat, not to give away spoilers, but when
But
they
it's
bring him
admitted
up
in
to kill
those.
bad vampires, he goes, "We've been forgiven."
It's I think there's kind of a difference. It's admitted in that, and the theology in like a vampire movie is still there's a falsehood to it. As for something like The Conjuring, it's insidious. Get it?
Wait, you mean there's not a falsehood in other discussions of religion in film?
Well, I don't think they're trying to slide it in on you, and I don't think it's as insidious.
Well,
It's
there's a whole quote unquote studio out now making quote unquote Christian horror films,
Are
which
you
is real. I haven't seen any
serious?
because it's scary. That the whole concept is scary.
I think that I mean, it's, when you go back, and you're talking about good versus evil, it's impossible not to get elements of religion being brought into, now, I think the difference is, and I think what you're talking about, Sean, is where I have an agenda. I have a Christian agenda or a Jewish agenda, whatever it might be.
Right.
And I'm trying to use the horror film as that to advance my agenda.
right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the trappings of religion being part of the horror film, because I think that that's inherent.
I actually prefer it in my supernatural horror. That's why The Exorcist is my favorite horror film. I mean, God and the devil exist in the context of that movie, but that film is not trying to convert me into a Catholic.
Right.
It's just it's
If anything, it's going to scare the hell out of you to keep out of Catholicism.
keep out of everything theological.
But before we move on past The Conjuring, can I just say that James Wan's a hack?
Sure.
Thank you.
I have to agree with you. I mean, from everything I hear, we all have mutual friends with the guy, and I hear he's like a really cool guy and keeps it real. So I don't begrudge him his success, but I'm not interested at all in seeing any of his films.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan. I try so hard to when he puts a new film out to go, this will be the one that convinces me, and this will be the one that wins me over, and it just never does.
Rob
so.
Zombie's got a better shot. You know what I like in his stuff too? They're like Will Ferrell movies. They're glorified TV episodes that hit the theater. They're 90 minutes at best, and you pay $10 to $15 to see them, and they keep knocking them out.
Yeah, I really hated Insidious. I mean, Insidious.
Oh, that fucking sucked. But again, it's weird. I mean, I'm glad
Like Insidious 1 and 2, and I have to give him props for creating a franchise, and so that Tobin Bell could become famous, who's one of my favorite character actors.
And Lynn Shay.
Love her too.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
great. So I don't begrudge their success. I just have no interest in engaging with it as material.
Well, it's kind of like polka music, you know. I mean, there are people that like polka music, but when it hits my ear, it doesn't do anything for me. So
I'm a fan of the polka and have danced it in many pits with my sister.
Aren't you
Sweet.
Polish?
I am. I'm part Polish and raised that way. Polish Catholic background. Yeah.
What does "raised that way" Polish mean?
Well,
Her dad's got a rusty zipper and yellow tennis shoes.
raised Polish. It's like, 'cause I'm from Jersey City. A lot of folks identify with their ethnic background and cultures. So I was raised culturally that way. So the way I'd celebrate holidays, the way that the sort of food that we talk to. My mother speaks fluent Polish. It was her first language. So contextually within my life, there's a lot of Eastern Europeanness going on.
You'd be scarier if you spoke Latin.
Can I have a small sidebar and ask, are you much of a fan of Polish cinema?
I am. I like things from a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries, and that's also why I like a lot of Mexican horror because of the strange Catholic symbolism. Because the way that I was raised, and I'm a godless heathen because that's what all Catholics wind up as, is that both being raised with an Eastern European Catholic background, there's a lot of mysticism in that and the belief of miracles and what about your dreams, because it's still, the roots are very still
Right. It's all
matriarchal,
like,
pagan.
it's like Eastern Europe Orthodox kind of stuff.
If they have sort of a mystical element to them, I assume it's sort of
Yeah,
like
I get the religion.
that kind of
It's
area of the world.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So okay, so we've
So yes,
established something.
interest in Eastern European and Mexican cinema, because of their use of, like Sean was saying, is that, well, these films have an agenda. The other things sort of flow into the idea of Southern grotesque literature, that if the god and devil are real and exist in society or in your community, it's not a good thing. It's actually incredibly terrifying.
Right.
Well, it's the reduction of all horror to its simplest point, right? Good and evil, right? You got something that's incredibly good that's going to hopefully save the day, and something that's incredibly evil. And so I think that it's another. It just lacks subtlety for me. I just want more than just there's this thing that's going to get you. It's always fallen um, flat for me. Maybe it's because I wasn't raised in a religious household. I mean, my mom's idea of a religious experience for the family was watching a Cecil B. DeMille movie on TV. So, but yeah, it was so it doesn't resonate with me the same way, for example, that a lot of possession films and devil films. In fact, my wife, who grew up and went through Catholic school,
See, I have, and I wanted to always research this because I do have friends of different cultural backgrounds that love The Exorcist. People who are Muslim, people who are Jewish, and they find it incredibly scary. Because I tell folks, and it also goes into the idea of spirit films or films that have ghosts in them. It's like that also comes out of some sort of Judeo-Christian canon. And a lot of
right.
folks who were not raised with religion have taken issue with the supernatural. But I am fascinated in the supernatural, and the pain of watching something like The Exorcist, which we've discussed on the other podcast, the other episode, is that the profound pain that Jason Miller goes through because of his loss of faith is, to me, it's like the drama elements of that film and the visual elements of that film horrify me, because like on the other end, it's like, well, if it's all make believe, it's like, well, people watch a lot of fantasy, they watch Lord of the Rings. I mean, I don't give a shit about fell beasts, but again, that takes a moment to like jump and to think about these sort of worlds, this mythology that's apparently not real.
I think what's interesting too, also, is on the flip side of the coin, the devil has become. I mean, the church has become the bad guy, and it's very rare that a satanic film will actually. I mean, people will be entertained by this stuff, but not usually scared by it. I mean, like I just watched Lords of Salem, and I don't think anybody was really scared of that film so much as like, wow, that looks really neat, because now with all the shit that the Catholic Church has done, and every week you're reading about a Catholic priest who's molested somebody, the church is no longer the cavalry that's riding over the hill, and with them becoming vilified, the devil becomes a lot less scary.
I was going to say, it's not surprising to me that people from Christian faith, Jewish faith, and Muslim faith all identify and are afraid of these types of films, because essentially they all believe in the same God and the same devil. They're the religions that are separated by semantics. It'd be interesting to see if a Buddhist, for example, is as scared of The Exorcist as somebody from any of those other three religions. But So we've talked about what's not working, and we're going to come back to what's not working. Heather, do you have something that you think is working? What works? What's good?
In contemporary horror,
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a lot of horror films, and the best film that I saw last year was Duke of Burgundy, which is not a horror film at all. I think I don't know what's
Let me rephrase that question. Do you see anything in horror now, contemporary horror, that has you excited? That has you, that
no.
that Okay.
I agree.
Really nothing.
80s
Nothing.
and 70s. I mean, there are some great films that I've seen. I mean, Spring is just coming up from Draft House Films. I like that a lot, and it was incredibly moving. It's from the guys who did Resolution, which I think is also another great film. So I would say within maybe the marketplace or maybe within the genre industry, the ability for indie filmmakers to sort of rise up a little and be able to control their own product outside the studio system. I think that's where, these two films came from. And I think that's a positive thing, but that's more of an industry focus that I see, is that the more and more Hollywood focuses on the big brands and they have the infrastructure to make that happen and make the marketing happen, is that we're starting to build this momentum, much like in gaming, of these independent guys seeking investors and crowdfunding.
Right, you're
Something
Adam
they
Wingard's. I just watched a movie today. I finally got around to Starry Eyes. Have you guys seen that?
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah,
That's
there's something that works for you then within the genre. I mean, again, to quickly contextualize it, an actress goes out for a role, doesn't get it until they see her freaking out on herself. Then they give her a second audition, and then she's given a chance to jump on the casting couch, and it becomes this whole metaphor about selling out. But she slowly turns into this monster at the end, and that's got like Pat Healy from God, he was in The Innkeepers. Heather, it's got
Cheap Thrills.
Say what?
He was in Cheap Thrills.
Yeah, Cheap Thrills, which is one of my favorite movies of last year. It's got Mark Center from Red, White, and Blue. It's also got the female lead from Red, White, and Blue. Her name's escaping me right now. There's this whole kind of crew that's doing stuff. I mean, you see it in the VHS anthology films that are coming out. I think there is a lot right going on with modern genre film as well, in horror.
You have to talk about the essence. The essence of this is like the films that I've mentioned. There's no formula that I can point to or trend.
Right.
They're just good films that you saw. Like Housebound was a great film from last year as well. But there's really no formula so far that I've been picking up, other than these guys understand how to write rich characters. As we go back to a film like The Exorcist, those characters are written realistically. They have great actors, and there's a sense of drama that we're putting into the genre. I mean, Spring is a love story between a guy and a girl who has this strange biological problem, and it has Lovecraftian undertones. But what makes it a great film is how those two guys, the woman and the male, act, what they say, how charismatic they are on screen. You really want to follow them.
Right. And I'm also noticing that there are a lot of strong female leads in horror films now. When it used to just be like the final girl. Well, that's not a strong female lead. I mean, even in something like The Town That Dreaded Sundown, the recent version, which isn't a remake, it's actually a continuation of the original. The female protagonist is the hero. In Starry Eyes, the lead character is a female, and she's both the antagonist and the protagonist. The Taking of Deborah Logan, the Possession film that recently came out, that's actually pretty scary. It's all females. Proxy is about women. Even something as commercialized as Above, So Below, that kind of found footage movie where they go underneath into the French catacombs and find hell. The hero, and not the final girl, not the survival girl, but the hero is a female. And then we have stuff like Proxy, and then one of your favorite films, Heather, which I've not seen yet.
Final Girl comes from the slasher genre. These movies are not slasher.
Right.
I mean, we've sort of moved away from that. I mean, the only slasher film that I can think of in recent time are things like Hatchet, the Friday the 13th reboot. That's kind of where the final girl was attached to, because again, Hollywood's making the product. They were interested in sequels. They wanted something that's a broad sell to their audience base, which is the youngins who are going to be scared about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and a guy in a hockey mask killing you. But these times are different, and a lot of these films that work are about these intimate, unique moments that the screenplay creates, and that we're watching, we're engaging, we're a part of that person's journey. We're not just like a Twitter soundbite.
Right. It's all about paranoia. It's all about
very,
paranoia and existentialism now. Go ahead, though.
it could be. I mean, the original guy who I love the way he writes his character is Buddy G and stuff like Night of Nightmares or Combat Shock. It's like he took a film that is very small and focused on these idea of character studies, and you couldn't help but to watch the films and just be intrigued by the direction he's giving to them, but also their dialogue. So maybe when I look at films that are character studies that I love, things like Joe, things like Jackknife, things like Taxi Driver, maybe some of that is moving into these indie productions, because they're character studies that contain creature elements or supernatural elements.
And it's awfully forgiving when it comes to budget too, isn't it? In a way.
It is, because you don't have enough money in the marketplace to sustain these big studio movies. And other than being completely shallow and just showing action, just showing blood, and there's a place for that. There's a place for that too. You're showing character. Langley?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that's what happens whenever you have no money. You're being forced to be more creative, and you come up with something, for example, like The Babadook, which I think is one of the best horror films made in the last 10 years. And it has very little of what a lot of people consider horror in it. There's not a lot of effects, there's not a lot of blood, there's not a lot of this and that. It's like you said, it's the character development, and so you wind up caring about these people. So whenever something bad happens, that is genuinely scary. What I wanted to do is I wanted to ask everybody, has there been anything that you've watched in the last 10 years that actually frightened you, that actually scared you, that stayed with you, that made you think about it later, late at night, that made you look out a window, because for me, no, that hasn't happened in a long time. And in my opinion, well, I guess first going back, okay, do we all agree that one of the goals of a horror film, is to scare you, is to frighten you? Yes?
Not necessarily. No. I'm not really scared when I watch horror films, because it's an iconography that I identify with very deeply, and I like to be sort of part of that strange, nihilistic, dark kind of world and hang around the creatures that it has. So no,
sure,
a lot of people don't.
Well, I think there's two sides to that. I mean, that's the Frankenstein side, so to speak. Then there's the Exorcist side. I mean, the last creature I want to hang out with is Pazuzu. Let me ask you this, Langley, because I'm pondering your question right now, and it might take a couple of minutes. But in the same regard, are you scared still by the movies that used to scare you? Has the terrain changed, or do you think you age out of being able to be scared?
No, see, that's my point, is that I think that in order to really scare people, or what do I know? Scare me, is you got to reach back to my primal roots. You got to reach back to the things that scared me when I was a little kid. Those are the things that are deeply ingrained in our psyche. Those are the things that we're really scared of. There are truly frightening things that there are plenty of movies made about. Any of the zombie apocalypse movie. I mean, if that really happened, that's frightening, right? But we watch it and we're not scared of it. I watched China Syndrome. Remember China Syndrome?
Oh, yeah.
The horribly frightening premise, but you're not scared watching them. You know what I mean? Like, I think you got to go more personal. You got to reach down into that part of you that was being, when you were being formed, when your ideas, when your essential self was being formed as a really, really, really young child.
Well, in that
That's, again, why the Babadook, I think, works really well. Is because you're dealing with a very, very, very simple premise of the boogeyman. And whatever form that boogeyman takes, then that is what is, I think that's what's always going to stay with you. You could be 50 years old, and if in the right situation, you're going to go right back to that same child that you were at a certain age and be afraid of X, Y, or Z. The things that you see in the news on a daily basis, I don't think are going to scare you because you've been sensitized to them and it's part of your daily existence.
In a dark theater, something like The Taking of Deborah Logan might scare me a little bit. The Babadook had its moments. I saw it at Sundance last year. But actually, now that I've thought about it, the scariest, the two scariest movies I've seen recently are, and I both watched them in the last week, are Citizen 4, which is the documentary about Edward Snowden, the guy who leaked all the government secrets, and Kill the Messenger, with, I forget the actor's name, the dude who plays Hawkeye, about the reporter from the San Jose Mercury News who uncovered the whole selling of cocaine for guns for the Contra War. Those things scare me, not because of their politics, but because they scare me in an existential way. They're still they're coming to get me kind of thing going on. I'm only coming around now to believing in Big Brother and the power of surveillance of the internet, and that's what's scaring me now. And that's working almost in a strange kind of Cronenbergian way on me. It's all about paranoia and, again, existentialism. So that's the shit that really scares me now. But it's probably my age.
Look, I'm a 55-year-old man. I don't get scared at horror films, but I think that I like what Heather was talking about, the iconography of it all. I think that's what's always appealed to me, why I love Giallos and why I love it. It's the theater of it, yeah. And upon that grand stage is how we sort of open for discussion topics that normally would be impolite, like death and dying, and what if someone kills you, and it's the way we sort of bring death closer and hope to understand it is by continually getting on the roller coaster ride that Hollywood provides for us. The problem is, in my opinion, is that American studio system Hollywood is making films based all off of focus sheets and interviews done outside of the theater. So I blame them, but I don't blame them. And the part I don't blame them about is that, true enough, they're probably interviewing the people that are coming out of most theaters. But the problem is that most theaters are in malls, and the more adult viewer is now staying home because, quite frankly, I can build a better viewing experience in my house than I can at a movie theater. And we've talked about that before. So there's like this miscommunication between what horror audiences want, and they're trying to get from independent film, but independent film is still trying to catch a wave as well, because there's always the allure of that one film, that Blair Witch Project, that's going to break out and become a huge thing. But we're always discussing the same thing. I now really don't care if it's zombies or it's werewolves, but we're talking about death, and that can get squidgy sometimes.
I like that word, squidgy.
Squidgy, yeah.
I just saw a movie that everybody is freaking out over in a positive way. The horror community and film critics even are giving it huge props, and that's a movie called It Follows. And I just saw it at Sundance. And basically, this girl sleeps with this guy, And through sleeping with him, she takes on the curse of this spectral entity that's going to follow her. And if it ever catches up to her, it'll kill her. And the only way to get rid of it is to pass it on to somebody else. The catch is, if that person is killed, then it reverts back to you. So it plays on these tropes of sex equals death and all that kind of shit. And it is the most, I cannot believe people are rallying around this film. It is the most boring, derivative piece of shit I've seen in
And
a.
I've mentioned that you're the only guy,
Yeah.
or human being, I should say, if I shall be so bold, to not like it. Because my friends saw it at Fantastic Fest and they were obsessed and they were very sad that I didn't get a chance to see it.
I don't
Also,
get it. It goes nowhere. It's completely cliche. John Carpenter called. He wants his first reel of Halloween back. I mean, which can be a good thing. But when I walked out of the screening, I said it's like John Carpenter directed an episode of Goosebumps with titties in it. And of course, that sounds great on paper, but up on screen, not so much. So I think the old tropes are still working for people, but I don't get it. Going to be hard to talk about because you guys haven't seen it. But go to the blog and read my fucking gut fucking spilling review of It Follows. I can't wait for you guys to see it though, because I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but
we know that.
then again, everybody like Devil's Rejects, right? So
I'm a
Well.
fan of Devil's Rejects, except for
what'd you say, Langley?
I'm conflicted on Devil's Rejects, I'll be honest. I did a lot of the coverage for Devil's Rejects, and they were very, very nice to me when I went and visited them. So it's very hard for me.
I'll say this.
That's why I think It Follows is doing well too. Hold on to that thought, Langley. That I'm glad you said that, because they were very nice to you. I think things are skewed in a festival setting, and also seeing this film with an audience who's open to already enjoying it, and they've almost already decided. It strikes me as a film people have decided to like. I'll put it that way. And then when you see it in a film festival setting and the hype is up and all that shit, it's way, way easier to get sucked in and be on board. I wasn't though. But anyway, go ahead, Langley.
I was just going to say The Devil's Rejects is the best 70s film that I've seen that wasn't made in the 70s.
I'll have to say Jim Mickles' Mulberry Street's the best 70s film I've ever seen that wasn't made in the 70s.
And what I mean by that is it plays with, I mean, it's a very 70s film, but it's not like something like Planet Terror, right? Where it's trying to be something. I think it just is.
Do we consider Robert Rodriguez bro horror?
Boy, he's right there. I think
Heather?
no.
Okay.
I don't feel that he's bro
I'm
horror.
just
And I
curious.
also, no, but there is some bro horror that I have liked. I'm a fan of Cabin in the Woods and Cloverfield.
Well, you also like the Soska twins and their bro horror.
I've only ever seen American Mary, and I am a fan of that.
That's fucking bro horror all the way, in my opinion.
You don't
bra,
like
or
them
bra
because they look
horror.
pretty and wear nice dresses with blood.
So we're gonna lump bro horror and bra horror together, kind of in the same wheelhouse.
Hell yeah, get some white dreadlocks going on. Fucking fire up the bong, bruh.
All right. Well, I want to bring up a movie in not in the last couple of years, but in recent history that I think is indicative of everything that's wrong with horror films now, and that is the 2011 The Thing.
I like to call it the thingy.
The Thingy. Here's a movie that when you first hear the premise, hey, we're going to go back to the Norwegian camp prior to what we saw in The Thing, which most of us, and I don't know, maybe not you guys, I don't know, but most people consider a classic.
Oh, you can speak for me on that. Damn right it is.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And so, and when you first hear that, it's like, oh yeah, right? But it has it's hard to talk about it without comparing it to the Carpenter movie, right? Which, you know, we weren't talking about older movies, but
And I think it's fair to compare it to the Carpenter movie
Well, yeah.
because it's directly related.
You have to, right?
yeah, you can't help it. For one thing, from the very first note of music of the Carpenter film, already dread is there, right? I mean, it's like the music, the camera work.
The dread of, oh shit, is John Carpenter doing the music to this? Fuck.
Which he didn't, actually.
I know. Go ahead.
And Ennio Morricone.
I know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Anyway, so everything about the first movie builds tension, builds suspense, builds fear, right? The way the camera moves, everything. And the other movie is shot just like any other movie. It's like, you know, it could just as easily be, you know, about somebody's failed relationship. Then they feel the need to try to hit every beat that was in the first movie. So basically, blatant imitation.
Yeah, they wanted to remake it, but couldn't get the money for that. So they were like, well, we'll just do a prequel.
The
problem is, I think, everything that should have made it great, i.e. the computer, made it cheesy because it looked like CG animation.
Right, exactly. And that's the final thing is that, and the thing that drives me absolutely
it's not the
nuts.
final thing.
Well, it's the final thing for me, and it's the thing that keeps me, you know, from is basically you had these amazing practical effects that were done by ADI, and they were, if you've seen them, if you've seen their YouTube reel, it's just, and what's eventually what resulted in the making of Harbinger Down, amazing stuff that you just look at and you go, oh my God. And they put CGI on top of it, and it looks like everything else out there. Every other cartoon bullshit that we're spoon-fed by Hollywood and say, look how amazing this is. Look, man, look at that first scene in the thing when something goes, you know, haywire, which incidentally was done by Stan Winston, not Rob Bottin, was the dog, right? The weird dog creature, right? Yeah. It's in the dark. You see it through flashlights waving around, right? And it's real. It's right there in front of you. It's right in front of the fucking camera. And so many producers and studios, they buy into this computer bullshit. And
you know, Ray Harryhausen said something very astute about CGI. He said when it looks absolutely realistic, it becomes mundane.
I would also say that from a production level, that a lot of people feel that they have more control doing a lot of stuff in post.
Well, of course they do, because
they feel they can go in and change it. And I know a lot of times the VFX houses go like, we can make this better. Producers listen, and it's like change. But I want to talk about The Thingy for a moment. When I saw a screening of it, they played the original John Carpenter film, and then they played The Thingy right after it. John Carpenter film, do not know if would ever play well with audiences today. Characters, it's slow, it builds tension, there's drama. It's not about this idea, which I think you're talking about, of only spectacle. There is some great monster moments in the film, but I'm not watching contrived spectacle. Now, when I then watch The Thingy after that, The Thingy is much like, not comparing it to the quality or worship of Aliens, but it has a creatures and it's an action film. Well, it has brought any of that nuance of Carpenter's work.
Do you know what the biggest ball it drops, The Thingy, for me, is the creatures are too static. They're not oily and nightmarish like they were in the Carpenter version. It's like they just kind of play on the Spiderhead thing, and it kind of rolls around the floor, and it's closer to a slasher with a weird-looking creature in place than it is that crazy, surrealistic, always morphing, you never knew what was going to come at you around the corner kind of thing that the Carpenter version had going on. Or even
do you remember? Priorities are different. They're not on tension and making people scared, making people love these characters, and now we're going to kill them, like in real life, what you deal with in real life, unfortunately. It's just about spectacle and effects and fireworks. That is why they made that film. It's like ooh ah, and then it's gone, and that's the problem with a lot of contemporary horror films.
AKA bullshit.
What Langley calls bullshit.
And, I haven't gotten around to watching it yet, but Heather and you, Tom, are both big fans of it. It sounds like the film Excision is the antithesis of this.
Huh.
I
You know,
love
I was
that
gonna say-
film desperately.
I was going to say one thing about the Thingy was that if you remember, Sean, we talked to one of the actors from that.
Yes.
And his name's slipping me, but on the night crew, and even he didn't seem completely convinced. Like he was kind of like, yeah, it's going to be great, but you could kind of hear in his voice like,
Yeah, and he
really?
talked about the practical effects that they were able to work with on set, and he even said, "I don't know if they're going to futz with it in CGI. They promised they weren't, but." And he sounded like he had no faith in that, and he was right. And he was also a genre fan himself. He was a big fan of the Carpenter film, which is why he was so excited
Yeah.
to be in The Thing. But yeah, you're right. He was like. And it was. I remember feeling so bad for him when we finally saw the finished product, because he was really excited at the prospect of being in a film that was going to go ahead and follow through with the practical effects, and they washed over it. I mean, Peter Jackson has done the same thing, and like you said, Heather, it's about control in post. The orcs in the Hobbit film, without the CGI, the costumes they were wearing are terrifying.
I love them, and then I can tell when they look like they come out of a computer game.
But then they painted over them, and it was a cost.
See, and that's the thing, is that there's what drives me crazy is that producers and studios are convinced that doing computer generated effects are cheaper. It's not.
Lord, no.
It costs so much more money because there's this tweak factor. So, for example, if you're shooting a practical effect, you got to get it on the day, right? That's it. That's all you got. Whereas with the computer generated effect, you get this tweak factor. Oh, we'll keep tweaking it. We tweaked it all the way up to the week before it was released. Well, all that time that somebody's sitting there tweaking that, they're getting paid, and it's bullshit. And it's time. And you know what?
And it causes a horrible amount of scope creep.
Dude, it's freaking,
It defines scope creep.
Dude, listen.
Get it out.
Even something that, how much did Avatar cost?
Yeah, a lot.
$300 million, right?
Right.
It was insane, right? Look at it. Does it look any different from a fucking video game? No. Not in my eye. I would much rather see. Well, but anyway, that's a different issue, and I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. The point is that the 2011 thing, the Thingy, is so demonstrative of what is wrong with so many horror films.
It was
today.
a money grab. They're all money grabs.
Well,
It's all
it's
like, I
what
got
it
a
is,
title.
too. It's
Nobody cares
There's
about
some
it.
money
big budget
grab
horror films,
love.
studio horror films, because I think if we stand off and away from ourselves for a minute and look back at film, what's that Pat Healy film again, Heather? Dirty.
Cheap Thrills.
Say what?
Cheap Thrills.
Cheap Thrills. Again, I haven't seen it, but it's obvious. Something like Excision, Starry Eyes, even The Town That Dreaded Sundown, or The Taking of Deborah Logan, which even has some names attached to it.
Well, the whole point is that we don't need Hollywood anymore, because I don't know what they're offering the genre fans, since they want to focus on making
Not a-
Marvel and DC movies. And again, they have the infrastructure to do that, the ability to run that capital. But I think horror is going to go back to being exploitative, independent, and have its own financial ecosystem around it, and truly be what it is. It's a very proletariat genre, and it should be in the hands of the people, and tell our stories and tell the primal stories that we need to discuss.
So in that way, how do we keep things from becoming a bunch of devil's rooks, so to speak, and a bunch of just cheap-looking shit?
I love myself some cheap looking shit. Puppet Master 3, it's wonderful.
No. See,
Spooky.
as I've
It
said
doesn't
before,
all have to be a classic sort of film. It could also be fun, but it's also depending on how they make fun films. The Thingy is not fun. Spookies is fun.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say that the nice thing now is with the democratization of technology that anyone can make a film. And as I've said before, the problem with that is that anyone can make a film. So it's like, again, as I've said before, it's like panning for gold in a river of shit. As a horror fan, you really have to wade through a lot of it to find
But
little nuggets of gold.
didn't we always have
Well,
to do
yeah,
that?
sure.
But it's like the bad stuff that we found. I think there's a sort of like lo-fi authenticity to Nudist Colony of the Dead, which we're just sort of not seeing in the low budget fare that they put out there.
So we've all cited things that we don't like and things that we think are demonstrative of the problems with horror films today. Let's each of us give a shining example of what we think is right, of what is good.
I'll go first. The thing that comes to mind most strongly over the last year is The Town That Dreaded Sundown. When I watched it, I couldn't believe how beautifully shot it was. It took the premise of the original and amplified it without remaking it. I mean, the original exists in the new film. The new Town That Dreaded Sundown opens up with people in modern day watching the old film at a drive-in in the town that it happened, and the murders start occurring again. It gets a little Scooby-Doo at the very end, but believe it or not, in a good way. And when I looked up the director, whose name I should have written down because I knew I was going to bring this film up, it was no surprise because while he didn't work with them in a technical aspect, he's been like the personal assistant for people like Martin Scorsese. He's been around true filmmakers who understand how what makes a story successful. And also, again, to bring up the female lead in it and the way her character is put across in the film, it's very forward thinking. It's also at the same time it's slick. That's how I would like to see the studio horror films to go. And then I think we're heading back into almost a Cronenbergian kind of and Kafka, even to go down that rabbit hole even deeper, kind of paranoia in horror films, and that's where I think it's all going. But The Town That Dreaded Sundown is probably my favorite recent horror film, which surprised the shit out of me when I saw it.
I still haven't seen that. For me, it's probably Spring, because when I watched it at Fantastic Fest, it made me cry.
Wow.
Because I was very moved by the ending of it.
Did
and
they kill
how
the puppy?
No, because I watch films with animal violence in it. It doesn't really move me when they kill those son of a bitchin' turtles. Nobody should trust them.
You're laughing at that new Super Bowl commercial they just pulled out with the puppy, aren't you? You're like the chick in Toxic Avenger who pleasures herself over Polaroids of roadkill.
I am that person, yes. And we know this.
And
It's
that's
not
Jersey
shocking
too,
anybody.
so it must be in the water.
I shock anybody. Yeah, I mean that's why my hair is always bright colors. It's toxic waste.
What about you guys?
Infected my made me a horror fan.
Tom.
I'm
Okay.
actually considering.
So Tom's thinking. So this isn't super
I was just gonna
recent,
say
but it's
John
within
Wick.
the last few years. For me, it would be something like The Whisperer in the Darkness, which is super low budget. I believe made for $400,000. And also for me, the only folks who've ever gotten Lovecraft right is the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. Made this movie called The Whisperer in the Darkness, based on the same story by H.P. Lovecraft, and they have this wonderful concept called mythoscope, and it's basically what they do is they look at the year that the story was written, and they film it as if they were filming it that year. So, for example, yeah, when they made the Call of Cthulhu, which was written in the 1920s, they filmed it as a silent movie because that's what was around in the 1920s. And then whenever they made The Whisper in the Darkness, that was written in the 1930s, and they basically shot it as if they were shooting a Universal horror film. The reason why it works so well for me, it's not because it's scary. You know, I mean, it's scary in the sense that, you know, cosmic horror is scary, but
No, it's not.
it depends. It depends. The reason why I like it is because they were able to take $5 worth of mileage and turn it into, in my opinion, $1,000 worth of mileage. If you get a chance, check it out. The Whisper in the Darkness, made by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. And the effects are... There's not a lot... That's the thing, is that there's not a lot of effects there. There's not a lot of monster there. There's not a lot of that kind of stuff there. What's there is...
That's good because Lovecraft never described
Is
his monsters.
mood.
Yeah.
Is,
You know,
yeah,
you
true,
know the
exactly.
scary thing about, well, let me rephrase that. The concerning thing about Lovecraft short films is that same problem, man. I mean, there's that whole series that comes out on DVD. Tom and I have a friend, Eric Morgret. You may even know him, Langley, who's done a couple. And there's the Lovecraft Film Festival, and so much of that stuff is just goofy.
Well, you have to look at what they have to work with, right?
Right.
Whenever you read Lovecraft, you know, there is a...
Well, but I mean, it's not like any of us are a stranger to low budget filmmaking. I mean, with like
Right.
Him and whatever else. So
Right. In my
Well,
opinion,
Spring
the
is
best stuff is...
Lovecraft inspired, so that's two Lovecraft. Weird movie.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said Spring is very inspired by Lovecraft.
Well, see, and that's the thing. It's like if you're gonna when you look at Lovecraft, he gave us so much of what is now considered, basically so many of the tropes that we have come from Lovecraft. As Stephen King says, he is the father of modern horror. He's the guy that kind of introduced us to a lot of these ideas that we see in films, and it becomes very nebulous. Very, you know, the term Lovecraftian gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of what we consider horror today comes from Lovecraft. These guys are basically going straight to the source. They're doing Lovecraft stories. Other people are making Lovecraftian films, whether it's Cabin in the Woods, whether it's Alien, whether it's The Thing. They're all they all fall under that umbrella of Lovecraftian. And I think that
Which deals with mysticism, which deals with occult imagery, which deals with monster imagery. And that might be the theme that we're beginning to say, especially now that the church has gone away. I remember talking to Richard Stanley for a second, and when I go into Urban Outfitters, there's all this occult shit that you could buy there.
Right.
So perhaps this is Lucifer Rising. It is a new dawn for the beast in cinema that the independents will bring.
It's the golden
rises.
Dawn. And then, of course, you know, Lovecraft, for me, the underpinnings are all about, again, paranoia and, to a certain point, existentialism. So, Tom, have you thought of something?
no,
John,
no, there hasn't been nothing in the last year that I've gotten excited about. What I hope to see in the future is, I'd love to see a return to the ghost story, but because I think that's within the reach of a low budget filmmaker, because you don't need all that. It's not high in effects budget. You don't even have to do a lot of CG stuff. So I'd like to see that. And I'll
You
highlight
might need to define that a little more because a lot of the independent films that I have seen, all the producers want something like Insidious. So it's inside a house, there's ghosts. I mean, it seems very popularized,
right.
and but they're not hitting on sort of the more
But
interesting
it's all
ghost
that.
tell.
A lot of it's like, let's strap a GoPro to some moron's head and send him into a haunted house. So like I'm really interested in this Guillermo del Toro Crimson Peaks because I think if nothing else I can sort of obsess on the house. Um,
Yes.
Have you seen
I'm
The
one of the
Woman in
people.
Black with Daniel Radcliffe?
Yeah, it's a great house. It's like in I even defend Jan de Bont's Haunting just because the house is so cool.
Or
Um,
13
You defend that movie? Wow.
no,
Yeah,
just
you
Maybe.
purely
strong arm.
when someone says what's a great set, that's a great set. That's a great set. I like to see that. I'm I hope to see even though I'm not a big appreciator of the premise, but I'd like to see more werewolf movies coming out. Last Rites is coming, so that's cool.
I
Um,
told you I just saw a really good one from overseas called When Animals Dream.
mm.
Check that out.
And I
So I just watched another one by David Hayter, the screenwriter, who's going to be doing. It seems like it was his grooming film called Wolves, with what's the dude from Game of Thrones who played Conan, who's going to play Aquaman. He's like the alpha male wolf, and there's some.
Momoa,
So it's
Jason
kind of like
Momoa.
Teen Wolf
What?
Two
Gonna play-
meets The Howling, and
Dare Samurai is a German horror film which uses the metaphor of the wolf and the werewolf. It's from Tribeca last year. I don't think it has distribution. That is an interesting take
what's it called again?
on Dare Samurai.
Okay.
The lead is amazing.
And the other
He
thing
has
I was going to
Rucker
And the other
Hauer.
thing I was going to say is that I agree with you about paranoia. As you see the rise of things like, politically, as things start to get a little more weird, and we're going into an election year, I think you're going to see some dystopian stuff. You're going to see some, uh, you know, uh, remakes of stuff. I hear, is Logan's Run still on the way?
Oh Jesus!
Actually, I have the screenplay, and it's really, really good. Christopher McQuarrie has done quite the job with it.
Anyway, so while I haven't seen anything recently, um, that gives me hope. That's where I'd like to see things go. I really am I want to see more of like this. Let's slow the pace down a little bit. Let's bring it back to the creepy. Let's bring it back to the another Guillermo del Toro film, The Devil's Backbone. Let's give it some old fashioned sort of winding staircases and
You
big
want
portraits.
you want something that stays with you after the film goes, something that's more haunting than a jump scare.
Well, I think those jump scares and that kind of stuff work for when you're 13,
Right.
because you really don't. You're not familiar with the rhythm of how film goes. So yeah, maybe as I get older, I want more story. I want less bombast, and I want less. But on the other hand, I want the monster to count. When I see the monster, I want it to count. Don't chintz out on the monster, people.
I would
If you're going to
suggest
invest in anything, invest in your monster. What's that?
Yeah, last year I saw a great Latin horror film, ghost story, kind of more haunted house called House at the End of Time, and that's sort of and I don't want to even describing it would give too much away, but that's another movie at the end that the audience left Fantasia because there was a film fest screening and everyone was crying.
That's not the one that was made in Oregon, was it? With the little kid
No.
in it?
No,
Okay.
this is
And-
this was made in Latin America. or
And I'll
Mexico.
always throw out that I want to see more. I want to see someone return to the Giallo, but that's just me. No one will, but that's just me.
Well, except the couple that did
Well,
Mare and The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears.
Agreed.
That's not really returning to it. That's a tone poem.
Yeah, that's like sort of taking
Agreed.
silly putty to the genre and laying it over and getting a nice transfer.
Films, but I don't think it's what Thom is looking for in his need for it. You
I
probably
wanna-
look for something like Deep
You know what else?
Red
I'll
or
throw this
something
out
more
too.
Inferno or
I'll throw-
Suspiria.
I'll throw this out too. And maybe this is a topic for another discussion, but why hasn't No Holds Barred horror made more use of the NC-17 rating?
I think
Oh, that's-
streaming is the future of that. I was actually talking to a representative from Netflix at Sundance, and I brought that up because they were talking about all the big original programming they're doing as far as comedy and quote unquote TV shows. And it kind of occurred to me right at that point. It's like, you guys have the Wild West, and it's wide open for you to do NC-17 style stuff.
Because it's hard to do it. I think it's a lot of times it's hard to do a festival run. I mean, for me, if you want to talk about the most legendary horror film in the last 10 years, I would have to say it's Serbian film, because that's what my friends still talk about. That's what they want to see over the house. That is the iconic NC-17, no holes bar. I'm going to create something incredibly, incredibly fucked up. But I think that they, again, we can't be, when we're creating horror, we cannot be mannered. Do not be mannered, because you have to be vulnerable and open and wild. You could have a structure,
but it's still about commerce, so it's always going to be mannered to a certain point.
Right, exactly. It's all about money, so you're not going to get a studio who's going to back a movie that's NC-17. They want to get the kids into, they want to get the teenagers, they want to get the kids into the screens.
Funded.
Which is bullshit.
And now, if you look at the way Cannes looks at NC-17 ratings, I think it was last year or the year before, they mentioned that they have more appreciation for the NC-17 movie as they consider it adult content, which might be interesting, Thom, to say, and I would like that too. It's like what we're talking about is a lot of fun horror films, a lot of films that have drama or have this indie film for it, but there's nothing out there that I've really seen that is super adult that you're talking about.
Well, imagine David Cronenberg setting out to make an NC-17 film. That's horror.
That's so hot. I'm gonna have to take time for myself to think about that. He's gonna make a no holds bar horror film for me. That would be very beautiful.
Yeah.
See, and for me,
or Clive Barker. I'm sorry, Clive Barker.
Same, yeah, no.
As long as he didn't direct it, he'd be fine.
See, for me, it would be all about taking the aesthetic of the 1930s horror film and turning it into an NC-17 rating.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, an NC-17 Frankenstein, an NC-17 Dracula, an NC-17 King Kong. Does King Kong get a boner? Sure he does.
Well, I think that's my point is that...
I don't know if I want to see that.
Yeah. But that's my point is I would hope that the people that took advantage of the rating didn't take advantage of it just to show a boner. I would hope that they would say, okay, now we can really set out to scar our audience.
Yeah, without the accused of committing a mind crime.
Without the MPAA coming in and going, what did Wes Craven say one of his notes was that the film's too intense? It's like, no, now we have freedom to be as intense as we want.
I disagree in that, like, for example, we keep coming back to the Serbian film. I think the Serbian film is bullshit. I think it's one of the stupidest fucking movies I've ever seen. It does absolutely nothing for me. All it does is fucking piss me off.
But for a lot of people, it's their entryway. But it is. It's to the world of extreme cinema. Serbian film now for a whole new generation. That's their touchstone.
Legendary. It's a legendary film.
It's
yeah. Well, Faces of Death was bullshit. That's how I got in it.
It is bullshit. Yeah.
That's how I slid into it.
I have my Faces of Death VHS. It's also, if you like that sort of movie, I sometimes find that one will call bullshit on extreme horror if one is not a fan of extreme horror.
See, I don't even consider a Serbian film horror. It's fucking.
Well, it's like the Fred Vogel
You know what?
stuff.
You know
It's
what it
not
makes
horror,
me want
it's
to do?
about horrible
It makes me
things.
want to fucking put somebody in a headlock and elbow them in the face until their face is nothing but a fucking pile of goo. That's what it makes me want to do. That's not horror.
But isn't that what art does?
No.
Yes. Art
What
does
art inspires. Art makes me want to make and fucking make shit.
To paraphrase
No.
Blade Runner, art is a test to provoke an emotional response, and in this case, it worked.
Yeah,
That's
it
what
fucking
I'm saying,
pissed me
it
off.
totally
Yeah,
works
fuck
online.
you.
One at a time. One at a time.
Are you being the bouncer?
Well, I will say this: there's a difference between horror and horrible. And by the word horrible, I mean horrible things happening to someone on screen does not, for me, denote horror. Just
To
like
me, it's
Right,
just
about
horror
intent.
can be denoted by
Are
something
the
like the Citizen
Hey.
4 documentary about Edward Snowden that I watched. To me, that's horror because it's terrifying. Anyway,
Well, there's horror, and then there's terrifying stuff. So I mean, we could have a whole discussion on sort of these films
I mean,
that are in those in between states. Because a lot of stuff to horror means to horrify. Very few films that I watch that aren't completely gross, disgusting movies like the entire Guinea Pig series are, they're horrifying. That would be a horror film. Most horror films are about being scary and terrifying, though they're not called terror films. And for me, my favorite thing to watch is viciously disturbing films. Most of them are called dramas.
But
But they
for me,
their own
I,
special
I
way.
love nothing. I love nothing better than feeling that this filmmaker doesn't have my best interest at heart. That he's really trying to provoke me and to um, make me feel something, be it anger, be it lust, be it
I
whatever.
agree with Tom. It's like what was
Agreed.
you can't
Agreed.
be afraid of the movie at some point. To paraphrase him, it's like that you need to be afraid of the person who made the movie. That's when you have achieved making something terrifying and horrifying.
so,
In
I
some
think.
But then
I
again, I
think
go
that-
back to my love of Ghoulies too, which I also love, and it has our
I think
best
that
interest
any good film elicits an emotional response. Yes. But if all it does is fucking piss me off,
And it succeeded.
no, fuck you. That's no.
I
fuck
agree.
that.
It succeeded.
No bullshit.
It
No.
succeeded.
If all it does is piss me off, then I come away with nothing. All I come away with is a sense of wanting to fucking go beat somebody up. And I don't want to do that because I've done that enough. I'm sick of that shit, right? I want something that inspires me. I want something that makes me make something.
But now we're speaking to personal taste.
Exactly.
So
sure.
Exactly.
you can say Serbian film did not really resonate with me, if we're going to be kind.
Right.
But I know people that love that film.
Yeah,
So-
those are the type of people I want to fucking kick in the face. Fuck those guys.
I just said the writer of it to do an Italian cannibal film.
let's all pick a movie that scares us to wrap it up. Mine is always The Exorcist. Heather, what movie scares you the most?
Putting me on the spot. I mean, I gotta go of all time.
Yeah.
Scariest movie I've ever seen. I'm gonna go. I generally it's a traditional thing, but I'm gonna go back to Little Heather being the first film that scared her, and that's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when the octopus attacked the ship. That was the first time I was watching something, and I was a little girl, and I was exquisitely scared. I was
Langley?
octopus in
Uh,
Popeye.
The 1973 made-for-TV version of Don't Be Afraid of the Dark with Kim Darby.
Oh, good one.
I'm kind of split just because of the way they both hit me, and one is The Others with Nicole Kidman.
Interesting.
I think that's got some of the creepiest sound design you'll ever hear in a film. If you watch that movie in headphones, and you'll have a new appreciation for it. And the other one is Inside. Inside really was it really resonated with me.
You know, what's scary to me and what's scary to you and what's scary to him and what's scary to her are different because we all come from different backgrounds and we all come from different things. it's fair to say that we're all scared of a lack of control. Whether we're claustrophobic, we have no control over that. We are scared of death. We have no control over that. We have, Lovecraft again said, the greatest fear, the fear of the unknown.
I think that some of it has to do with the fact that a younger audience is drawn to different things. A younger audience is drawn to the dismemberment stuff because it's part of their development, right? The realization that they're going to die, the realization that the body is a messy thing when it expires. And now I think with some of us, we've got some years on us, and now the things that scare us have changed, right? I'm not, while I fear dismemberment, it's not something it keeps me up at night. So I think as we change, hopefully our tastes develop. When I meet a guy that's my age and I'm 55 and he's rocking like a Hellraiser shirt, I just want to go like, really? Like, did you just get this at Hot Topic? And
there were 3 guys that met when they were in high school and stayed friends throughout all their life, and they all lived to be very, very old gentlemen, and were involved in this genre that we're talking about. And that was Ray Harryhausen, Ray Bradbury, and Forey Ackerman.
Love them all.
And the one thing that they all basically had in common, they all said in any interview that you've ever read by any of them, is don't grow up. Don't become that cynical guy. Don't become
me.
Yeah, don't become Thom. Still be amazed by the fact that there were dinosaurs in the world. Still be amazed that, any of these things that we're talking about. And I think that that's important, is to basically stay in touch with your child.
That's an exquisite way to end this.
And beautiful. On that note, this has been episode 11 of the Bonus Material Podcast. I'm Sean.
I'm Heather.
I'm Thom.
And I'm Langley.
Good night.
Have a good one.
Good night. The XIT exit.